Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mrs. G's Storytime. We are reading The Rainbow Garden by Patricia St. John with permission of Moody Publishing Company, and we are reading Chapter 19, A Shock and a Meeting. "I think we should be going home," said Mrs. Thomas. "I don't want Philip to get cold. It's been such a lovely treat for us both." "Oh, Mummy," pleaded Philippa, "just wait 5 minutes. The miss is coming ever so slowly, and I want to talk to Elaine for a minute. I won't see her for another 5 whole days." "Very well, darling," said Mrs. Thomas. "Just 5 minutes. I'm going with Francis and Robin to see the baby calf." Peter and Janet and Johnny went off to do the washing up in the lake, and I sprawled on the grass beside Philippa's bracken nest. She was bursting with her secret and came straight to the point. "Elaine," she began, "do you remember what Mrs. Owen said about begging at the door and going in?" "Yes," I answered, "of course I do." "Have you gone in, Phil?" "Oh, yes, I think so," replied Philippa rather shyly. "I thought about it so much, and one night, instead of saying, 'Please make my legs better,' I said, 'Please, can I come inside and be your own little girl?' And from that day, I've had a sort of feeling that I might be happy even if my legs didn't get any better. I've asked Jesus to change me and to stop me from being selfish and cross, and now I keep having new ideas about what I could do. It's rather fun. I've never thought of them before because I used to think there was nothing nice to do if you couldn't walk. Only I'm longing for you to come home and help me with them." "What sort of ideas?" I asked, deeply interested. "Oh, things like helping Mummy and making things for people," said Philippa, "and seeing how long I can go without grumbling and making a fuss about my lessons. I haven't time to explain now, but I keep on thinking about your verse. If it was my path of life to be unable to walk, it says I could still be happy, and doesn't it?" "Yes," I said firmly, "fullness of joy anywhere, if we're walking the path of life with Jesus." Mr. Owen had explained it to me lots of times. "Philippa," called Mrs. Thompson, "we really must be going, or we shall be caught in the mist." The next moment Mr. Owen bounded up the slope and picked Philippa up in his arms. There was just in time to show her the calf on the way down, and then she was lifted into the car. A delighted Frances peeked out from between the grown-ups in the middle of the front seat. She was going to drive back alone with her father, and they were going to stop off at the tea shop. The car set off in the cold, creeping white mist, and Peter and I followed as far as the trees at the top of the lane. It was going to be an evening with Mrs. Davies' kitchen and the cozy fireplace. "I've never seen such a thick mist before," said Peter, looking around. "I can't see the lake at all." "Look, there's someone coming down the path, Elaine. A man. I wonder where he's going. Not many people come this way." The man did not see us, but we could see him quite clearly. He had a bag slung over his shoulder that clattered a little, and as though he were carrying pots and pans. And the moment I saw him, I knew him. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the mist. Peter stood rigid and uncertain beside me, and he too had caught a glimpse of that wild, unshaven face under that old hat. "Elaine," he whispered, backing behind the rock. "Is it him?" I nodded. "Are you absolutely sure?" "Absolutely certain." "Well then, this time we mustn't lose him." Peter's eyes were bright with adventure. "He can't see us in this mist, and we can track him by that funny clatter and his boots on the stones. We must follow him, Elaine, and see where he goes. Come on." There was nothing to do but follow, for I was far too frightened to go home alone. Also, I did not want to desert Peter, so I set off behind him, shivering with cold and fear. The man did not go down the lane. He turned off to the left, across the boggy uplands, which made things far more difficult and dangerous, for there was no covering trees, and we had to keep a good distance away. We could just see his dim, shambling figure striding along, and we knew that if he turned around he would certainly see us. He was walking very fast, for he was wearing big boots that squelched through the mud and the bog moss, but for me in my small sandals it was much harder going. Twice I sank right down into that black water over my ankles, and to my terror, Peter seemed to be getting ahead of me. I dared not call in case the man should hear and turn around. Thicker and thicker grew the mist. It seemed to be building white walls around us, and I began to panic and run wildly to catch up with Peter. but it was a tremendous ground to run on, a treacherous ground to run on. I caught my foot in a clump of thick heather and fell headlong. For a moment I was too stunned to move, and when at last I scrambled up again, I was quite alone in this white, silent world. Peter and the man had completely disappeared. Well, he couldn't be far ahead. Surely all I had to do was to run fast for a few minutes, and Peter's sturdy figure would loom up in front of me. But I forgot that we were following no road, and I'd lost all sense of direction. Peter might have gone anywhere, and the more I ran, the further away from him I might be going, out into the lonely night to be swallowed up by the thick darkness in the mist. I stretched out my hand in front of me and found I could hardly see it. There was only one thing to do, and that was to turn around and try to find my way back to camp. So I turned around and trotted off, shivering and crying in the direction I thought I'd come from. I suppose I walked for hours and realized that I must have gone around and around in circles. I was almost too tired to feel frightened any more, and at last I sat hopelessly on a little rock and gave myself up for lost. The ghostly white mist was changing into gray, and I knew that night was falling over the hills. I wondered dully about what would happen to Peter, and I tried to think what to do next. If I sat down on that wet rock, I was sure I would freeze to death. It seemed years since I sat on that sunny slope with Philip. We had talked about the path of life, and it wasn't the path of life I wanted just then. It was a path back to camp. It was the first time since being lost that I had been able to think properly, for I had been stupid with cold and panic before. But now in my weary, numbed brain came a new thought. Was the Lord Jesus still there beside me in the midst? Was I still in his presence? If so, why was I so dreadfully afraid? "Show me the path, Lord Jesus," I whispered. Just saying his words seemed to warm and strengthen me and give me new courage. I got up and went on walking, not knowing where I was going, but with a strong feeling of being led. I felt the presence of the Good Shepherd with me, who long ago I remembered had gone out to the mountains to seek one lost sheep, and how much more now would he seek for a lost child. New peace came into my heart, and I suddenly felt safe. I could not say how long I walked. Sometimes I called out, but my voice sounded so small in the blackness that I gave it up. At last I found myself scrambling on loose stones and realized I was back in the old quarry, near the ruined house with the blackened walls and the empty staring windows. My heart gave a leap of terror which passed quite quickly. According to Johnny, someone lived in these ruins, but anyone at that moment was better than no one. Surely anyone on a night like this would take pity on a lost little girl and take her home. I seemed to have reached the top of the stone pile, and my eyes, peering in the darkness, could make out a solid mass ahead of me. The next moment I slipped, and because there was nothing but loose stones to hold on to, I went on slipping and slipping faster and faster. The next thing I knew, I was lying halfway in the water, half out of it, with my leg all twisted, going the wrong way. I tried to move, but the pain made me feel sick. Once again, in desperation, I cupped my hands around my mouth and called, "Help! Help! Oh, please help me!" But in my heart I cried, "Oh, Lord Jesus, I can't go any longer. Please send someone now." I lay holding my breath and listening. At first I could hear nothing but the wind and the water, but after a few minutes I heard the noise of slow, shuffling feet coming from inside the ruined house. "Help!" I shouted again. "Oh, please help me!" I saw the glow of a lantern framed in one of the window gaps and heard the creaking of the broken door. Someone was certainly coming, and whoever it was an answer to my desperate cry for help. I had not been forsaken. I had been led to this strange place, and now someone was being led, slowly stumbling over the stone towards me. I could hear the heavy boots kicking the stones and splashing through the water, and a voice I had heard before said, "Who's there?" Why did that voice send shivers down my spine? I caught my breath and seemed to lose the power to answer. The next moment he'd raised the lantern above his head and was looking down into my face, and I was looking up into his haggard, sick, unshaven face, a face that I knew. Tomorrow we'll read Chapter 20, The Rescue. I love you, I'm praying for you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.